We will now see how a static masking can be achieved. The static masking is required when you already have a data set and then you want to mask certain attributes of those data set. So in the proposed solution, we are using Guardian, which can help mask the service. Now there are various ways by which we can, when we can call this the masking service. So we could write a job that regularly takes the data set and calls the masking service and then updates another database, or creates another file which is masked and can be sent for data consumers, or published in a catalog. Now, let's just see what are all the various options. So here I could use a masking flow. So the masking flow is a wizard-driven approach to create a masking workflow. And with this I can call the REST API, which I would have already created using the service. The other way is to use a data stage flow, or ETL flow, wherein wherein we can create a job or a flow that actually regularly calls the masking service, and then masks this information and updates a data store or an updates a file, and then that gets published into the governed catalog. Or we could also use a notebook. In that case, we just write a Jupyter notebook Python code, wherein we call the masking service and then mask the data and are able to see how it is masked. And this notebook can again be called as a job. So let's take the first technique, which is a data stage flow. So here the data stage flow is basically an ETL engine. So we can see that the information is coming from JDBC, which is a patient information, and then I would actually create a flow which is basically a tokenizer flow, which will actually take this input and mask this information, and then push it again, the tokenized records into another database. So let's take quickly look at how this works. So here I will see that there is an assembly editor, and then here because I'm calling a Guardian service, which is a REST API. So here I am using this service, which is available here, and then basically I'm calling this tokenized method, and then this is regularly run at at various times, so that the data is taken and then it's being updated in this kind of JDBC source. For example, here I've tokenized it. So once tokenized it, I am able to insert these new rows that I have read, and then this is like a tokenized set of records that will be available in the database, or I can also push this to a data catalog. Now this is one of the methods. The other method is basically using as I mentioned, using a notebook. So here I can see that I have created a job called tokenize. So if I look at the job, it's basically runs at the specified time. So let me just open up the job. So here this job actually, so if I look at the details, this job actually calls a notebook, a Jupyter notebook, and we can see that it takes the input of patient CSV, and then it produces a tokenized patient CSV output, right? So while it does that, it calls the Guardian service, which with this URL where the tokenizer service is available. So we can call the detokenize endpoint as well as the tokenize endpoint. So we can mask it and also unmask it, if we so desire. So let's now take a look at this notebook. So here this is a standard Jupyter notebook which is used by data scientists. So here we have just created some configurations to connect to different data sources. Now we kind of import this data from these various data sources. For example, here I am reading from a CSV file. or I'm querying, from a DB2 databases. I mean, whatever is the scenario, we are just doing both of that for this exercise. So when we look at the when we look at the standard information that is coming out, when it is not tokenized, we can see that encounter ID, SSN ID, and everything is available as it is. For example, Chatterjee, or all these names and email IDs are not masked; they are just the plain text. Now once we are able to then call this, identify some of these sensitive columns, and then call the tokenizer service. So here I'm writing some simple logic to call the tokenizer service on certain set of attributes or certain set of columns, and then once it's done, I can see that this is available now as as a masked or a redacted service. For example, social security number or NRC number is with some other characters, and credit card number is obfuscated, as well as the email ID is replaced with some characters, right? So this is how this works. So once I have done this, I can now save the tokenized data into a file or a DB2 database. So this is just that snippet of code. So we can see that before versus after tokenization. So here we saw that there is a raw text and this is a tokenized set. Now this whole notebook, as I explained, is called as a job, which can regularly run and tokenize the service, right? So this concludes the demonstration of the static anonymization technique in the proposed solution.